Good night, all. We're here to discuss the ethical and communicational issues which arose with Scandinavian Airlines Flight 751. My name is Liam Millett. The flight went down on December 27th, 1991 in Gothenburg, Sweden. The aircraft in question was a McDonnell Douglas DC-9 MD-81. The crash was attributed to multiple engine failure caused by foreign object contamination, which is just a fancy way of saying that something flew into the engine. Now, when we look at the engine failures, we know that jet engines require laminar or smooth airflow. The air flows through a series of fans and compressors, and the hot exhaust gases leave through the back of the engine. However, if a problem arises in one of the compressors, the exhaust gases may flow to the front of the engine, and this is called an engine surge. Surges can seriously damage or even destroy engines, which is what happened to both of the turbines on Flight 751. Now, what flew into the engine? The answer is ice. Ice formations drastically lower the amount of lift produced by an aircraft's wings, so proper de-icing is critical. Clear ice, which covered the upper wing surface of Flight 751, can only be detected by hand, and this was not done. Only a visual inspection was carried out. So the ground crew only cleared the visible slush and snow from the top and bottom surfaces of the wing. Now the ice that wasn't checked for, that would have built up overnight, broke off of the wing surface during takeoff and was pulled into the engines, which are located on the rear of the aircraft, a very distinguishing feature of the DC-9. And this ice damaged the front stator and fans of both engines, leading to the surges. Another contribution to the crash was the Automatic Thrust Restoration or ATR system, which was developed to prevent stalling during takeoff and landing. A stall is when the aircraft flies so slowly that it cannot generate sufficient lift and literally falls out of the sky. To avoid this, the system automatically puts the engines on full throttle if it calculates that the airspeed is too low to maintain flight. The problem that arose is that during a surge, the best thing to do is to throttle down so that there would be less fuel in the engines. When the pilots did this, however, the system calculated that the thrust was too low, and so it put the engines back on maximum thrust, which would have fueled the fires which broke out in the left engine. Now, there are two major ethical and communicational lapses. Firstly, the ground crew failed to ensure that there was no ice on the wing. Yes, the aircraft was de-iced twice, but only a visual inspection was carried out. There was no way to be certain that clear ice was not on top of the wing, and this was actually blamed on SAS because they did not provide the equipment that would have been necessary to check for it. The other and bigger lapse, one would say, is the lack of communication between SAS and its pilots. The pilots, all of the pilots, were unaware that any of the aircraft that they were flying had the ATR system installed, and the crew was unprepared for an emergency of this nature because of the fact that they did not know the ATR system would react this way. Several minor issues occurred as well. During the flight crew did not keep in constant communication with air traffic control to inform them of the situation that was developing with the aircraft. Secondly, the pilot's testimony was released to the media first and not to the investigators aboard. This didn't pose any threat but at the same time showed a lack of professionalism from Scandinavian Airlines because the pilot was supposed to be quarantined until the investigation was completed. During the investigation, cracks were discovered in the left fuel line, and this would have contributed to the surges and the engine fire that broke out. In conclusion, several mistakes were made leading up to the crash of SAS Flight 751. It was determined that the flight crew were not at fault, but instead SAS's procedures were inadequate. Since then, steps have been put in place to ensure that an incident like this never occurs again. We reach the end of the presentation. Thank you for watching.